You are welcome to my channel. I'm GB Bello. In this video, I'm doing a princess dart blouse, a simple princess dart blouse. So the measurement that we will need, you need your shoulder, then you will need your armhole, you understand, then you need your bust measurement. After your bust measurement, you will need to take your bust point, go back to the shoulder, then you take your bust point, take your under bust, take your waist measurement, then you take the length of the blouse, where you want the blouse to get to. After that, then you can come back to take the bust measurement, make sure it is not too tight. Then you take the waist measurement, make sure it is not also too tight. You understand? Then you take the hip measurement, where the length of the blouse ends. Do you understand? Then you can now come back to take your sleeve length and the round sleeve, depending on the kind of sleeve that you'll be using. Now let's go to the table. That's about the measurement. Let's go to the table, then we can start. I'm starting with the back pattern, because you need to draft the back pattern first before you draft the front pattern. Now I'm starting with the neckline. This back pattern is going to have a zipper allowance, so I'm going to leave 1.5 inch for my zipper allowance. That's the first thing you do, because it's a back pattern. 1.5, you mark it down. 1.5. You can even rule it. You can rule it, or you can leave it like that. Just make sure you don't forget that you need to make a zipper allowance. Mine, for this pattern, I'm going to fold it backward. After I've done it, I'm going to fold it backward. Okay, now, so back to the neckline. Now the neckline that you are going to use, it depends on the style. There are some styles that the neckline for the back is up, is not as low as the neckline of the front, like this one that I'm drafting. Now there are some that the neckline for the back and the front are low. There are also some that the neckline for the front is high, like probably a cano neck, then the back will be low. Do you understand? Meanwhile, this one, the front pattern, the neckline is low, while for the back pattern, the neckline is not as low. So for this back pattern, I'm using 3.5 by 1.5 for the neckline. 3.5 by 1.5 for the neckline. So I'm going to measure my 3.5 here. Then I'm measuring 1.5 downward. 1.5 downward, then I will, the 1.5 is downward and the 3.5 is horizontal. So I'm going to then I'll use one of my cuffs to do justice to that. All right, having done that, the next thing is the shoulder. The shoulder for this pattern is 13 inches. So 13 divided by 2 is 6.5. Then I'll add just half inch to it for the sewing allowance. Then after that, I'll measure 0.75, 3/4 down, then another half inch down. The 3/4 is just for slanting, while the half inch is the sewing allowance. So I'm going to do it like this, then I'll slant it. The first one will be out with the cutting, while the one that is down is what I'm using for the sewing allowance. Now the neckline is done. The next thing is the armhole. The armhole for this pattern is 6.5. It's 13 inches. 13 inches. So 13 divided by 2 is 6.5. And I'm going to rule across that line as well. So I have my 13 divided by 2, 6.5, which I measured down. Then I rule, that's my bust line. So then I'm going to find the midpoint of that 6.5, which is 3.25. Then on this bust line now, I'm going to measure my bust. Bust is 35. Divided by 4 is 8 3/4. 8 3/4. Then I'll add 1 inch for the dart, and then 1 inch for sewing allowance. Like I used to say, for beginners, I always prefer that you had 1 inch for sewing allowance in case of anything that happens, so you'll be able to maneuver. So I'm going to use my curve now to do the armhole. So don't forget that you are going to carve it in a little. You already know that routine already. That's why I found the midpoint. Alright, so we've done the bust line. The next thing I'm going to do is to come down to my waistline. See where I'm putting my tape rule. Just check it very well. I'm not putting it here, and I'm not also putting it here. Check, find, I just found in between the edge of the shoulder and the edge of the neckline. You can see it here. You can see. So I'm going to check measure some vertical measurements now. The first one I'm doing is my bust point. The bust point for this blouse is 10 inches. My under bust is 13. My waistline is waistline is going to be on 15. Then the length of the blouse is 24, and I'm adding 1 inch extra for the hem allowance. Don't forget, I started from here. Then my bust point is 10. The under bust is 13. The waistline is on 15. I'm going to rule all those points now. The first one that I did is my bust line. The next one is my under bust. Then the next one is my waistline. Then I did the length of the blouse where I will measure my hip. Then the hem allowance 1 inch. So that is that about that. So that is okay now. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to measure my waist. Remember, this is my waistline. My own waistline is on 15 inches. So the waist is 30 divided by 4. That's 7.5. Then I'm adding 1 inch for that, 1 inch for sewing allowance. Because I'm going to turn it with lining, I'll add ½ inch. Then I'll come to my hip, to the length of the blouse where I'll measure the hips. Hip is 39 divided by 4. That's 39. That's 9 3/4. 9 3/4. Then add 1 inch for princess dart and 1 inch for sewing allowance and ½ inch for the turning. Then I'm going to connect the edges. I'm going to connect the edges. I'll do it down to the hem line. Down to the hem line. So now that you are here, just measure 1 inch up that you can use to curve the base of your blouse. Then use your curve. Yes. So this is okay now. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is to make the princess cut. Okay, now I'm going to measure the bust, the princess dart. I'm going to measure the princess dart now. So I'm going to start from my bust point. Remember, my bust point is 10 inches here. So nipple to nipple is 7 inches for this measurement. Divided by 2 is 3.5. Then I will add ½ inch for sewing, making 4 inches. So I'm going to point it 4 inches, and I will do the same thing on the under bust, 4 inches, on the waistline, 4 inches, then on the hip line too, 4 inches, which I'm going to rule. Remember, this is the back pattern. We will still cut the front pattern separately. So that is that. Then the next thing, I'm coming to here, to the armhole line. You know, we have found the midpoint of the armhole line here to here. This is the midpoint. So I'm going to put my curve. And I will use it to connect it. Then make sure it goes out with 1 inch. Like that. Then can also connect. Can you see what I did? I connected this line here. So what I did is just to find the midpoint of my armhole, then I position my curve there. Then I curved it, then make sure that it extended beyond the armhole line with just 1 inch. This is 1 inch. Then I connected the armhole because the armhole is now elongated. The reason why we did this elongation is because so by the time you are joining this one with this one will not be shorter than this part. So the last thing I'm doing now is just to cut. So watch the way I will cut. Remember, it has a zipper allowance, is the back pattern. So watch the way I'm cutting it closely. Then we use this back pattern to also cut the front pattern. Can you see the way I cut the armhole? Your cutting must start from the zipper allowance. Okay, so this is what we have. You can see, make sure you notch your zipper allowance. Then we'll use this back pattern to go and cut the front pattern.